There's a certain kind of loneliness that only exists on back roads after 10 p.m., where headlights feel too bright, silence feels too heavy, and the deeper you go, the more you realize help is miles away if something goes wrong. That's what I remember most about my first night doing DoorDash. This happened in 2022. My warehouse hours had been cut again, and rent was coming up fast. I wasn't excited about walking up to strangers' houses at night, but I didn't have much choice. So one rainy Tuesday, I finally sat in my old Honda Civic, staring at the glowing red Dash Now button. Anxiety sat like a weight on my chest, but I pushed the button anyway. The first hour was harmless. A burrito to a college kid, burgers to a tired mom, normal houses, warm lights, people who barely looked at me. Enough to make me think, hey, maybe this isn't so bad. I called my friend Mark just to have somebody's voice in the car. Mark overthinks everything, exactly the wrong person to talk to before nighttime delivery runs. "You're still out?" he asked immediately. "Dude, my cousin quit delivery after some psycho tried to get him into a basement in Northwood." "Fantastic. Thanks." "Great motivation," I said, and hung up. It was around 1015 when the order popped up. $25 payout. One delivery. 8 miles. Every instinct told me it was too good to be true, but bills don't care about instinct. I accepted it. The pickup was from a 24-hour steakhouse. Heavy, expensive food. When I got back to the car and checked the drop-off instructions, I felt a weird chill. Address 4402, Black Creek Road. Notes, porch light broken. Bring food to side door through the gate. Don't ring doorbell, the baby is sleeping. Leave on table inside screened porch. Specific, but not alarming. The only odd thing was how far out it was. Black Creek Road was practically swallowed by forest. As soon as I left town, the street lamps disappeared. The drizzle turned into steady rain. My car cut through miles of trees so old they formed a tunnel overhead. My GPS finally announced, "You have arrived." But there was no house. I slowed to a crawl until I saw a rusted chain-link fence and a gravel driveway almost hidden under weeds. A small reflective sign nailed to a tree read 4402. I pulled in. The driveway twisted up a hill to a 2-story colonial house. My headlights landed on peeling paint, boarded windows, and darkness so complete it felt wrong. Not the darkness of a sleeping family, this was the darkness of abandonment. And yet someone had just ordered a $60 steak dinner. I killed the engine, but kept the headlights on. The house didn't illuminate so much as recoil from the light. No movement. No sound. Just rain and trees. I grabbed the warm bag of food and followed the instructions. Side door. Through the gate. The wooden gate looked like it hadn't been opened in years. I had to shove it until it scraped across concrete with a painful groan. Beyond it, the grass came up to my knees, cold and wet enough to soak through my jeans instantly. If they have a baby, why is the yard like this? I rounded the house and found the screened porch. The screen door hung crooked on a single hinge, tapping softly against the frame with each gust of wind. Inside was not a table, but bare concrete. A sliding glass door led into the house. I used my phone, flashlight, and peeked through the glass. The room inside was completely empty. Not we, just moved in. Empty, vacant. No furniture, no trash, no signs of life. Except for one thing. A sleeping bag lay unrolled in the center of the room. Next to it sat a smartphone plugged into a portable charger. The screen was on. I stepped closer. The phone was open to the DoorDash tracking screen. It showed my location. Live. My stomach dropped. Somebody was watching me. But there was no one inside. Just then, my phone buzzed. Customer updated delivery instructions. I opened it with shaking hands. New instructions. Side doors unlocked. Please bring the food into the kitchen. I'm in the back room with the baby. Something was wrong. Nobody lived here. Nobody with a baby for sure. I tested the sliding door. It was unlocked. No way. No chance. I set the food down on the porch floor. I would take a picture as proof and leave. I lifted my phone to snap the photo. The flash lit up the yard behind me. And in the reflection on the glass, a figure stood in the tall grass near the broken gate I had walked through. A man, a tall man in a raincoat, motionless, facing me. I didn't turn around at first. My brain refused to believe it. But then in the wet silence, I heard a single heavy step forward, mud squelching under his boot. I turned. He stood 20 feet away, hood up, face hidden. In one hand, hanging at his side, he held a long metal object. A tire iron. "You didn't follow the instructions," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he had practiced saying it. Everything inside me screamed to run. I bolted toward the backyard. The man didn't sprint. He stalked, slow and steady, as if he knew I had nowhere to go. I slipped in the mud behind the house and skinned my palm open. When I reached the far corner of the property, I hit a dead end, a 6-foot retaining wall slick with moss. No way over it. I pressed myself against the wall, chest heaving. My phone shook in my hand as I dialed 911, and then I heard it. From the porch, the sliding glass door rolled open. He had entered the house. A moment later, footsteps echoed inside, moving quickly across the hollow room. He was cutting me off. I sprinted back the way I came past the screened porch. The sliding door was wide open now. The sleeping bag was gone. I burst through the broken gate and saw my car, my lifeline. I reached it just as the front door of the house slammed open behind me. "Hey!" His voice was no longer calm. It was furious. I dove into my car, slammed the lock button, and twisted the key. The engine sputtered. "Come on, come on." The man walked down the steps toward me. The tire iron raised. On the second try, the engine roared to life. I threw the car into reverse gravel, exploding under the tires, skidding wildly before catching traction. My headlights swept across the driveway as I escaped. The man stood exactly where my car had been, motionless, watching me, raising one hand in a slow, mocking wave. I didn't breathe until I reached a gas station 20 minutes later. I didn't sleep that night, and I didn't learn the worst part until the police called me 2 days later. I thought the nightmare ended the moment I sped off that property, but the truth is that was only the part I experienced. What the police later discovered was far worse than anything I'd imagined while running for my life. 2 days after the incident, a detective called me. His tone wasn't skeptical anymore. It was tight, serious. "We sent units to 4402 Black Creek Road," he said. "The house is concerning. We need you to answer a few questions." I agreed immediately. Just hearing the address made my stomach knot. The detective continued. "First, did you at any point hear a baby at the residence?" "No," I said. "Not a sound." He exhaled sharply, as if that confirmed something. "Okay. Second question, did you see anyone other than the man you described?" "No, just him." There was a pause. We didn't find any evidence of an infant. No crib, no toys, no clothing, nothing. Of course there wasn't. I knew that. But hearing a detective confirm it made the whole thing feel real in a way that hit harder than the man's voice echoing behind me as I ran. He cleared his throat. "What we did find was unusual." He told me officers had discovered the house empty, just like I'd described. But when they searched more thoroughly, they found a hatch in the living room floor. Under it was a crawl space. Inside that crawl space was a makeshift camp, a sleeping bag, a lantern, a backpack, a pile of clothes, a collection of portable phone chargers, and dozens of empty DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Grubhub bags. Dozens. He had been doing this for weeks, maybe months. Placing orders using different names, different accounts, luring delivery drivers to a vacant, isolated house. "What was he planning to do?" I asked quietly. "We're not sure. But you said he had a tire iron." "Yes. That's enough for assault with a deadly weapon. Or worse." There was another long pause before he added, "One more thing. Probably the most important thing." My grip tightened on my phone. In one of the back rooms, he said we found a battery-powered baby monitor transmitter sitting on the floor. No crib. No signs of a baby. Just the transmitter. So the guy was lying about the baby. "Worse than that," the detective said. "We found the receiver, the parent unit, taped to the underside of the mailbox at the end of the driveway." I stopped breathing for a moment. What does that mean?" "It means he wasn't in the house when you arrived. He was outside, listening, waiting for you to pull up, hearing your car door open, hearing your footsteps." I felt ice crawl across my entire body. "He knew the moment you got out of the car," the detective continued. He knew when you walked around the house. He knew exactly when you hesitated. Because I had hesitated. I remembered standing in the driveway for several seconds before grabbing the food. I remembered adjusting my jacket, turning on my phone, flashlight. Every small sound I made had been sent straight to that man. The detective's voice softened slightly. You did the right thing by running. Most people, they follow the instructions. They go inside. I didn't ask what had happened to the others who delivered there. I didn't want to know. I didn't sleep for the next few nights. Every time headlights passed my apartment window, I jolted awake, convinced it was him, that he had followed me, that he had memorized my license plate, that he had watched me speed away and decided next time he'd be faster. Because that wave he gave me wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise. A few weeks went by. I tried to put the whole thing behind me, but fear doesn't just evaporate. It lingers, attaches itself like a parasite. I'd quit DoorDash immediately. I took different routes to work. I double-checked my locks. I avoided driving anywhere near the outskirts of town. But the scariest part wasn't that he tried to lure me into that house. It's that he was prepared for someone who didn't follow the plan. He knew the terrain. He knew how to cut through the house to intercept me. He had multiple vantage points, multiple traps, a whole system built around a lie, and he was confident enough to wave. About a month later, the detective called again, but this time he didn't sound serious. He sounded exhausted. "We haven't found him," he said. "The house was abandoned again by the time we returned. He left everything behind. Sleeping bag, phone chargers, fake DoorDash accounts gone. Do you think he's still in the area?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "People like this, they don't just stop. They relocate, start again somewhere else. They wait for the right property, the right night, the right driver." A cold silence settled in. "Just stay alert," he added. "And if you ever see anything suspicious, call us immediately." I promised I would, though. I hoped I'd never have a reason to. To this day, I don't deliver anything. Nothing. Not food, not packages, not favors for friends. If somebody asks me to drop something off at their house, I hand it to them in public, or not at all. Sometimes when I'm driving past neighborhoods, I don't know, I see homes set far back from the road, dark windows, no visible lights, long driveways swallowed by trees. And every time my hands grip the wheel a little tighter, because I know there are houses people live in. And then there are houses people use. If I had been 5 seconds slower, if my engine hadn't started the second time, if I had followed the updated instructions, I probably wouldn't be alive to tell this story. And somewhere out there, the man in the raincoat is placing another late-night order, waiting for another driver to tap dash now, waiting for someone who won't be as lucky as I was. This happened about 6 months ago. I was desperate for work after dropping out of college, and my uncle pulled some strings to get me a job as a night security guard at a self-storage facility. It was one of those massive, sprawling places with row after row of orange metal doors surrounded by barbed wire. The job was supposed to be easy. Sit in the booth, watch the cameras do a round every hour, my uncle said. Bring a book. Nobody comes here at night. For the first 2 weeks, he was right. It was boring, but easy money. The only people who came in were insomniacs moving boxes or people living out of their units, against the rules usually harmless, folks just trying to stay warm. I'd kick them out politely and that was it. It was a Thursday night around 2:00 a.m. when things got weird. I was in the main office, scrolling through TikTok, when the motion sensor alarm for Hallway C tripped on the monitor. Hallway C was in the climate-controlled building at the far back of the lot. It was the most expensive section, usually reserved for antiques or sensitive documents. It was also the creepiest part of the facility, long fluorescent-lit corridors with polished concrete floors that echoed if you so much as breathed too loud. I glanced at the CCTV feed. The screen was grainy, but I could see the long hallway. Nothing was moving. Probably a rat, I muttered to myself. The sensors were old and finicky. I reset the alarm. 10 seconds later, it tripped again. I looked at the screen again. Still nothing. Just the endless row of orange doors. I sighed, grabbed my flashlight and the master keys, and headed out. The night air was thick and humid. The facility was dead silent, the only sound being the distant hum of the highway and the buzz of the bug zapper near the office. I walked the quarter mile to the climate-controlled building. I swiped my keycard and the maglock disengaged with a heavy clunk. I stepped inside. The air conditioning hit me instantly. It was freezing in there. "Hello," I called out. My voice echoed down the corridor. "Security. Anyone in here?" Silence. I started walking down hallway C. I checked the handles of the units as I passed. Locked, locked, locked. I reached the end of the hall where the sensor was. There was nothing there. No rats, no spiders on the lens, no people. I looked up at the camera mounted in the corner. The little red light was blinking, staring back at me. I was about to turn around and head back to the office when I heard it. It was a sound coming from inside Unit C, 404. It sounded like someone running their fingernails down a chalkboard, but slower, deliberate. I froze. Unit C, 404 was one of the largest units. "This is security," I said, trying to sound more authoritative than I felt. "You're not allowed to be in the units past 10 p.m. You need to open the door." The scratching stopped immediately. Then, a voice came from inside. It was muffled by the metal door, but it sounded like a woman. "I can't," she whispered. He locked me in. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a squatter. This sounded like a crime in progress. "Who locked you in?" I asked, stepping closer to the door. "Is there someone else in there with you?" "No," she said, her voice trembling. He left. He took the key. "Please. It's so cold." I grabbed my radio to call the police, but then I hesitated. My uncle had warned me about this. "Don't call the cops unless you have visual confirmation. The owners get fined for false alarms." "Okay," I said. "I have a master key. I'm going to open the door all right, back away from the door." I fumbled with the key ring, finding the square-headed master key. My hands were sweating. I slid the key into the padlock hasp. It was a heavy-duty disc lock, not the cheap ones people usually buy. I turned the key. The lock popped open. I slid the latch bolt back and grabbed the handle to roll the door up. "I'm opening it now," I announced. I heaved the metal door upward. It rumbled loudly on its tracks, revealing the inside of the unit. I shone my flashlight into the darkness, expecting to see a frightened woman huddled in the corner. But the unit was completely empty. No boxes, no furniture, just bare concrete walls and a layer of dust on the floor that looked undisturbed. I stood there, blinking, trying to understand what I was seeing. I had heard her. I had heard the scratching. I stepped inside, swinging the light into the corners. "Hello, is this a joke?" And then I saw it. On the back wall of the unit, about 5 feet off the ground, there were fresh scratches in the drywall, deep gouges revealing the insulation behind them. And right below the scratches, written in something that looked disturbingly like fresh red lipstick or blood, were the words, "Don't turn around." The hair on my arms stood up. I felt a sudden shift in the air pressure behind me, like a door closing. I spun around. Standing in the hallway, right where I had just been standing, was a man. He was tall, wearing a security uniform identical to mine. But it wasn't just the uniform. He was wearing my face. For a split second, my brain tried to rationalize it. I thought maybe I was looking in a mirror I hadn't noticed. But mirrors don't breathe, and mirrors don't stand in the hallway while you are inside the room. The figure, the thing that looked like me, smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a distortion, the skin pulling too tight around the jaw, the eyes dead and glossy. Then he lunged. He didn't come for me. He went for the door. He reached up and grabbed the handle of the roll-up metal door. I scrambled backward, tripping over my own feet, screaming, "Hey, no!" He slammed the door down with a deafening crash. Darkness swallowed me instantly. The only light came from the thin crack at the bottom of the door where it met the concrete, a faint dusty strip of orange from the hallway lights outside. Then I heard the sound that sealed my fate, the heavy metallic click of the slide bolt being thrown across, followed by the snap of a padlock. "Let me out," I screamed, hammering my fists against the corrugated metal. It rattled loudly, creating a thunderous boom inside the small steel box, but it didn't budge. "This isn't funny. Open the door. Silence." Then a voice came from the other side. It wasn't the woman's voice anymore, and it wasn't my voice. It was a low, raspy male voice, muffled by the metal. "You have the master key," he said. "But you left it in the lock outside." My hand flew to my belt. It was empty. I had left the key ring hanging in the padlock hasp when I opened the door. "Why are you doing this?" I yelled, my voice cracking. "I need to finish my rounds," he said calmly. Then I heard footsteps walking away. Clack, 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 fading down the concrete hall. I was alone in the dark, with the scratches on the wall and the message written in blood. Panic set, in hot, suffocating panic. The air in these climate-controlled units is recycled, but in the pitch black it felt like the oxygen was already running out. I fumbled for my flashlight, which I had dropped in the fall. My fingers brushed against the cold concrete until I felt the metal casing. I clicked it on. The beam cut through the dust. "Don't turn around" was still scrawled on the wall. I forced myself to breathe. Think. You're a security guard. You know how these units are built. The walls were thin sheet metal. The door was heavy steel. I couldn't break the door. I kicked the wall, sharing the space with the next unit. It boomed, but it held firm. These were reinforced to prevent break-ins between units. Then I looked up. The ceiling wasn't solid, concrete. In these older facilities for ventilation purposes, the tops of the units were often covered with heavy-duty chain-link fencing or wire mesh to allow airflow from the main HVAC system. I shone the light up. Sure enough, about 10 feet up there was a heavy wire grid. If I could get up there, I could maybe cut the wire or unbolt it. But the unit was empty. I had nothing to climb on. I sat in the corner, knees to my chest, pointing the flashlight at the door, waiting for him to come back. Every creak of the building sounded like footsteps. I checked my phone. No service. The metal walls acted like a Faraday cage. Time blurred. It felt like hours. I started to wonder about the face. Why did he look like me? Was I hallucinating from the carbon monoxide of a forklift or something? Then the smell hit me. It was faint at first, then stronger. Gasoline. Liquid was seeping under the crack of the door, a dark, spreading puddle reflecting my flashlight beam. He wasn't finishing his rounds. He was burning the evidence. Adrenaline, sharp and painful, spiked through me. I couldn't wait for a rescue. I looked at the walls again. The structural support beams for the shelving tracks were bolted into the metal. They had holes in them, slots for adjustable shelves. I jammed the toe of my boot into one of the slots, about 2 feet up. It held. I reached up and grabbed the slot above it. It was sharp, cutting into my fingers, but I pulled. I scrambled up the wall like a spider, my boots slipping metal, screeching against metal. I reached the top, grabbing the wire mesh ceiling. My fingers wrapped around the steel wire. Below me, the smell of gas was overpowering. I heard a thwomp sound from outside, the sound of a match striking a vapor trail. "No," I screamed. I pulled a multi-tool from my back pocket, something my dad gave me that I always carried but never used. I folded out the wire cutters. They were small, meant for fishing line, not industrial fencing. I started snapping the links. Snip, snip. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the tool twice, almost losing it to the gasoline-soaked floor below. Smoke started to curl under the door. Thick, black, oily smoke. I kicked at the mesh. A hole the size of a basketball opened up. I snipped 2 more links, creating a jagged opening just wide enough for my shoulders. I squeezed through, scraping the skin off my back, and rolled onto the top of the unit. I was in the crawl space between the units and the actual roof of the warehouse. The air up here was clear, but hot. I crawled over the wire mesh, looking down into the other units, like a voyeur. I made it to the edge of the hallway wall and dropped down into the corridor, landing hard on my ankle. The hallway was filled with smoke. The door to Unit C, 404, was engulfed in flames. I slammed the fire alarm pull station on the wall. The strobes began to flash, and the siren wailed. I didn't stay to fight the fire. I ran. I burst out of the climate-controlled building into the cool night air, coughing up soot, and sprinted for the main gate. The police and fire department arrived 6 minutes later. They put out the fire before it spread to the whole building, but Unit C, 404, was gutted. However, they found something interesting in the unit next to it, C405. It wasn't a storage unit. It was a living space. There was a mattress, a bucket for a toilet, and a wall covered in photographs. Photographs of me. Photos of me walking to my car. Photos of me in the guard booth. Photos of me buying groceries. And on the table they found a mask. It was a high-end silicone theatrical mask. It didn't look exactly like me in the harsh light of the police station, but it was a generic white male face with the same hair color and jawline. In the dark, worn by someone of my height, wearing my stolen spare uniform, it was enough to fool me. The doppelganger was a man named Elias Vane. He had been the night guard before me. He was fired for stalking a female tenant, the woman whose voice I likely heard on a recording he played to lure me in. He had been living in the facility for weeks, obsessed with reclaiming his job and his territory. He thought if he got rid of me and burned the unit, he could just take over again. They never found Elias. He slipped out the back fence while the fire department was cutting the locks. I quit the next day. I moved back in with my parents. But sometimes when I'm in a public restroom and I look in the mirror, I hesitate. I find myself checking the edge of my own jawline, just to make sure the face looking back is actually attached to my skull. There's a particular kind of silence you only notice when you're far from civilization. A silence so complete it feels hostile. That was the first thing I noticed the weekend everything went wrong. It was winter of 2023. My girlfriend and I had been drifting apart for months, arguing about everything from bills to stupid household chores. The kind of slow decay you don't see until you're already drowning in it. She suggested we take a weekend getaway somewhere secluded, peaceful, unplugged, a reset button. She found a listing on a small rental site I'd never heard of. Not Airbnb, not Vrbo, something more obscure, marketed towards secluded luxury cabins for discerning guests. The photos looked unreal. Glass front A-frame in the mountains of Washington, perched above a river with nothing but forest for miles. It seemed too perfect, too cheap for the off-season. But I didn't want another argument, so I swallowed my hesitation and booked it. The drive up was already a warning. The GPS cut out 20 minutes before we arrived, forcing us to rely on handwritten directions. The host had emailed strangely detailed directions like, turn left at the stump, split down the middle, and veer right when the road narrows to a wide, single lane. The asphalt faded to gravel, then gravel to a thin dirt path twisting so deep into the evergreens that the daylight barely reached us. When the cabin finally appeared between the towering trees, I felt my chest loosen. It was beautiful, almost unreal. A massive wall of glass faced the forest, and the deck hung directly over the rushing river below. Cold air rolled off the water, mixing with the heavy scent of pine. Squeezed my hand. See? This is exactly what we needed. Inside the cabin was sleek, modern, spotless, and freezing. We turned the heat up, unpacked, opened a bottle of wine. For a few hours, it really felt like we might fix things. We cooked dinner together, played cards, laughed, genuinely laughed for the first time in weeks. But around 11 p.m., something changed. Went to shower, and I stayed in the kitchen, washing dishes. The interior lights were warm and bright, but that giant glass wall suddenly felt like a weakness. Outside was total darkness, a black screen pressing in, and the thought kept gnawing at me. I could see nothing out there, but anything out there could see everything in here. I was drying a plate when I heard it, a dull, heavy sound against the glass. I froze. It wasn't a twig snapping or the cabin settling. It was something hitting the window. Soft but deliberate. Like someone testing the surface. I walked to the glass, cupped my hands to block the reflection, and peered into pure darkness. Hello, I whispered immediately, feeling stupid. Nothing. Just my own reflection staring back. I returned to the dishes. 5 minutes passed. Louder this time, against the sliding glass door. My stomach flipped. I turned off the kitchen light to reduce the glare. The deck had a motion sensor floodlight, but it wasn't on. Shouldn't it have triggered Lincoln called from the bedroom? Did you hear that? Probably just a pine cone, I lied. My voice didn't sound convincing. I checked the sliding door lock secure. I jiggled it just to be sure. That's when the motion light clicked on. White light washed across the empty deck. No animals. No wind. Nothing moving. Came out wrapped in a towel, rubbing her arms. The light came on. Why? I don't know, I admitted. We tried to relax, climbed up to the loft bedroom, and crawled into bed. Being elevated away from the glass helped a little, but the silence kept growing. Not peaceful silence, expectant silence. I drifted into a shallow sleep. Then I woke up. Not from the roof, not from the deck, from inside the cabin. I held my breath, listening. Slow footsteps across the living room floor. I shook awake, my hand covering her mouth. She saw my expression and immediately understood. Someone was downstairs. I grabbed the only thing resembling a weapon, a heavy iron fire poker from the small wood stove. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. I crawled to the edge of the loft and looked down between the wooden railings. That's when my blood turned to ice. A man was standing in the living room. Not a shadow, not a hallucination. A man, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, ordinary clothes like he just walked out of a hardware store. His posture was relaxed, casual. He was holding something. Our TV remote. He pointed it at the screen, clicked, and the television burst to life with a blinding blue glow. He didn't look around, didn't flinch. He just watched the static like it was a campfire. Then he spoke in a calm, conversational tone. "I know you're awake," gasped softly behind me. "Who are you?" I yelled down. "Get out. I called the police." He laughed, a dry wheezing sound. "Police are 40 minutes away, Michael. Even if the landline worked. I cut it an hour ago, and you don't get cell service here." He finally turned to face us. His smile wasn't angry or unhinged, just wrong. Too wide, too calm. His pupils were blown, his eyes glassy and bright with chemical focus. "I'm not here to rob you," he said. "I used to be the landlord. They took my house. But I still have the keys." He lifted a key ring and shook it gently, like he was teasing a pet. "And I know where the spare key to the loft is." He began walking toward the stairs. "Block the door," I shouted. The next minute was chaos, shoving the dresser across the floor. The man's boots thudding up the steps, the air turning icy as the heater hummed to a stop. The power had gone out. And then, from under our bed, a phone vibrated. Not ours. A hidden phone. I reached under and grabbed it, my heart punching against my ribs. One message on the screen: "Look at the window." Slowly, I looked up. The skylight above our bed, a face was pressed against it. Wide eyes, fogging the glass, staring directly at me. There wasn't just one intruder in the house. There were at least two. For a few seconds, I couldn't even process what I was seeing. The face at the skylight stared down with a kind of manic intensity, cheeks flattened against the glass, breath fogging the pane in frantic bursts. And it wasn't the same man from downstairs. This one looked younger, meaner, trembling with excitement. The phone in my hand buzzed again. Let him in. He gets angry when he waits. The timing was perfect, too perfect. Whoever was texting was watching us in real time. Before either of us could move, the skylight shattered. Glass exploded inward like a shotgun blast. A boot punched through the frame, then another. Snow swirled into the bedroom. Screamed. I grabbed her hand and yanked her toward the bathroom just as the man on the roof dropped one leg fully inside the loft. At the same time, the intruder at our bedroom door slammed his shoulder against it. The dresser scraped an inch. We sprinted into the bathroom and slammed the door. I threw the lock, knowing it wouldn't buy us more than seconds. Someone punched through the thin wood just as I climbed onto the toilet to reach the window. "It's too small," cried, shaking. "Go, just go. Fear makes you stronger, smaller, faster." She squeezed through, scraping her ribs, then tumbled onto the porch roof outside. The bathroom door split down the middle. A hand shot through the hole, blindly clawing for the lock. I heaved myself up, wedging my shoulders through the frame as splinters rained down behind me. A fist wrapped around my ankle. I kicked hard, once, twice. My heel smashed into something soft, and the grip loosened enough for me to wrench myself free and roll out onto the snowy roof. "Jump," I shouted, barely recognizing my own voice. Hesitated at the edge. It was a 10-foot drop into snow and dirt. No time to think. She jumped. I jumped right after her. The ground hit me like a car crash. A bolt of pain shot up my leg, but adrenaline drowned it out. I hauled myself upright, grabbed arm, and we ran barefoot through the snow toward the car. The night around us felt alive, pressing in, watching. I kept expecting someone to step out from behind a tree or a pair of hands to grab us from the darkness. We reached the car. I fumbled with the keys, shaking uncontrollably. The lights flashed. The doors unlocked. We threw ourselves inside. The engine roared to life, and that's when the headlights swept across the cabin. 3 men stood on the porch. The landlord, the man from the skylight, and a third man I hadn't seen before wearing a suit holding a video camera pointed directly at us. Not chasing, not hiding, filming. He zoomed in on us as if we were actors in a scene he had shot a dozen times. I slammed the car into reverse gravel, exploding behind the tires. As we fishtailed down, the narrow dirt road sobbed into her hands, whispering, "Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop." I didn't. I sped like a lunatic, hitting potholes, bouncing through ruts, expecting their truck to appear behind us any second. But no one followed. We didn't breathe until the trees thinned and the empty highway came into view. 20 silent miles later, we pulled into a gas station, barefoot and bleeding. The attendant's eyes widened, and without asking a single question, he called the police. The next 6 hours were a blur: blankets, heated cups, questions. A room filled with state troopers looking at us like we were telling a ghost story. They sent a SWAT team to the cabin. Here's what they found. The cabin was empty. No footprints. No vehicles. No people. It looked untouched, sanitized. But they did find evidence, just not the kind that helped. Hidden micro cameras in the smoke detectors and picture frames, even inside the shower head. Every room was wired, and beneath the bedroom floorboards, screwed into a custom-cut cavity, was a server. The tech officer explained it with a grim look. We weren't victims of a random home invasion. We were content. The website we booked through was created 2 weeks before our arrival and deleted less than an hour after we escaped. The people in the cabin were part of a dark web operation producing real-time horror experiences for paying viewers. Rich psychos tuning in to watch unsuspecting couples fight for their lives. And the man in the suit with the camera, he wasn't recording for them. He was recording for the archive. The text messages from the phone taped under our bed, donor triggers. People paying extra to influence the scene. Whoever sent the message, look at the window, spent $500 in Bitcoin. After that, everything fell apart. They never caught the men. The crypto trails vanished into foreign servers. The faces meant nothing. No matches in any database. We moved apartments. I bought a gun. Started therapy. Weeks passed. Months. We tried to stitch our lives back together. But sometimes, survival isn't the end. 3 days ago, I got an email with no subject line, no sender name. Just an attachment. A video file. I knew I shouldn't open it. But curiosity has its own gravity. The video began with shaky footage, the man in the suit filming us as we sprinted to our car. The lens zoomed in on our faces, pure terror, frozen in high definition. Then the camera panned to the other 2 men. The landlord smiled, ran a hand over his face, and let out a relieved sigh. "Cut," he said casually. "Good take." Reset the glass. The next couple arrives on Tuesday. The video ended. I sat there, staring at the screen, my entire body numb. My first thought wasn't fear, it was understanding. A horrifying understanding. We weren't special. We weren't hunted because of who we were. We were episode 4. Somewhere out there, episode 5 has already happened. Or is happening right now. Or worse, hasn't started yet, but the cabin is waiting. And every time I close my eyes, I see that skylight, that face, those eyes, watching. Not because they wanted to kill us, because we were entertainment.